What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weer, and I like to talk about movies. In this review, we are going to talk about a brand new movie. Well, not really brand new. It's a movie that came out in April of 2023, so it's still relatively new. I just didn't have a chance to see it back then, and then it was playing near a theater that I was at, and so I went and saw it at this theater. And look at that. Isn't that a cute auditorium? I love the fact that it's a one level. You don't see those very often anymore, so it's cool to enjoy the movie in there. I was basically alone until this guy showed up and just stood there throughout the previews. He finally sat down, but with all that said, I enjoyed watching this movie in that theater, and that theater itself was probably the most enjoyable thing about this movie. It's made by the same people who made the movie God's Not Dead, so it has an agenda, which right off the bat, I wish it didn't, because this movie could have been better. But we'll get into that in a minute. Let's talk about Nefarious, or let's do a movie review for Nefarious. There we go. I'm gonna leave that in there.
It's starting to happen. Can you feel it, James? Can you feel it? Okay.
And so, guys, Nefarious is directed by Chuck Konzelman and Carrie Solomon, and it also stars Sean Patrick Flannery as Nefarious, and it stars, I'm never going to get this right, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it, Jordan Belfi as Dr. James Martin. I swear I did like 10 cuts, and I couldn't remember those words in that order. So that's who it stars in this movie. As far as the movie is concerned itself, this movie is about an execution that's about to happen. Dr. James Martin comes in, he has to evaluate this character known as Nefarious. He has to evaluate them because they are on death row and sentenced to be executed in 24 hours, but the state wants to make sure that they are mentally fit to be executed. So when Dr. James Martin, a proclaimed atheist, goes in to figure out whether or not this person is mentally fit to be executed, the guy tells him right off the bat, hey, I'm a demon, and on top of that, you're a murderer, and on top of that, you're going to commit 3 murders before you leave here today. And so, obviously, the doctor's like, all right, mentally unfit, and that should have been the end of the movie. However, it's not, because the demon, or Nefarious, has this way about him of getting you to talk to him, which is my first issue with this movie. This movie, right off the bat, has an agenda, because it's made by those same people that made God's Not Dead. So this movie, hardcore hammers home that this guy 100% is a demon. There's a little bit of doubt at the beginning of the movie, but they hammer down real quick that this is a demon. And by the end of the movie, you're like, oh yeah, it was 100% a demon. Yep, one of Satan's angels. This is 100% a demon. That's what this movie does. And I think the movie could have been a lot better had they just left that up to the viewer's interpretation instead of hammering it home so hard. Because it is an interesting concept to be like, this person has dissociative identity disorder or split personality, what we used to call it. And then on the other side of the table, you've got an atheist who doesn't believe in God. And so as a viewer, you're like, okay, this person doesn't believe in God or the demons, and this person's claiming to be a demon. This person's got master's degrees and doctorates and is a doctor itself in, science. And so, of course, they're not going to believe in demons, but there's reasonable doubt on this side of the table to maybe believe this guy is possessed. Had they gone that route, I think the movie would have been a lot more interesting. But because immediately they convinced you, the viewer, that this was a demon, it was like, oh, well, you took all of that flair away. You took away all of that wonder, all of that intrigue. You took that away right away. So that's an issue I have with this movie, is the fact that it just made sure that you understood this is a fight of good and evil, not science, and is this person mentally deficient. And that was the thing I was thinking about during this movie, is the movie Split. In the movie Split, James McAvoy's character plays a character who has split personalities, but ultimately at the end of the movie, spoilers I guess for Split that came out in 2016, but at the end of the movie in Split, he did have some superhuman powers. And so while he did have these split personalities, there was something more to him. And that's what makes Split such an interesting movie, because you are dealing with somebody who's mentally unstable, but ultimately does have some of those powers. So in this movie, if they had gone that route, if they had given you, the viewer, the ability to be like, I'm questioning both sides here, I don't know, I think it would have been more intriguing, if nothing else. But because they hammered home right away that this 100% is a demon, you're like, okay, so now I got to buy into that before I can move forward with this movie. As far as moving forward with this movie goes, as for likes, I didn't mind the back and forth. I didn't think it was poorly written. What they wrote about wasn't my favorite thing, but I didn't think it was poorly written. I thought it was well executed for what they did. That's pretty much my only like for this movie. The dislikes are just they're very much so pushing one agenda. And I'm not saying only one side does it. Both sides clearly do it with different movies. On this side, you've got movies like Nefarious or God's Not Dead. And on the other side of things, you have movies like They, Them, or you have movies like Black Christmas, which pushed an agenda in both of those movies, a very hardcore agenda. Not saying I liked one more than the other. Just to be clear, I'm right here in the middle, like, hey, I just want to see an entertaining movie. Can either of those extreme sides give me that? Most of the time when they dip too extreme on both sides, I end up walking out of the movie like, I wasted my time. And that's kind of how I felt with this movie, because it just pushes these things down your throat. So I'm going to get into some spoilery territory. So if you haven't seen the movie and you do want to see it, I'll throw a spoiler tag up. There you go. So like I said, I'm getting into spoiler territory here. You've got the demon who claims this doctor is going to commit 3 murders before he leaves for the day. And I thought that was an interesting concept to begin with. I was like, oh, that's cool. Let's see like what he's able to do in here. But he doesn't necessarily mean he's going to commit those murders. He means that he kind of already has. And what he means by that is that this doctor assisted suicide his mother previously. And so that is a murder in the Christian religion. And this demon is basically schooling this atheist on that, which is something we'll get to in a minute. Then the next murder is that while they're in that cell talking, the atheist girlfriend is currently getting an abortion at the request of the atheist doctor. She's getting an abortion. And at that moment, when she gets the abortion, that is the second murder. So again, now you have to go along with the fact that assisted suicide is murder and abortion is murder. So as long as you're on board for those things, you're still on board with this movie. If you're not, at this point, you've completely fallen off. The third murder is signing away that guy's life, knowing that the demon is in control, which ultimately the doctor does. Take the spoiler tag down. With that said, with those spoilery things, those murders that were committed in this movie, if you believe in those things, then you'll be on board for this movie. You'll say, yeah, that guy is a murderer and the demon was right. But that is my next biggest issue in this movie, is that the demon, Satan's pawn, is the one schooling the audience, the non-believers in the audience, for the majority of this movie. Now, they do kind of give the doctor a redemptive arc toward the end of this movie, and we'll get to that in a minute. But that's my next biggest issue, is like, okay, you've got an atheist on this side, and you've got a demon on this side, and the demon's like, we didn't even come up with cancel culture. That was you guys. And I was like, really? Like, do we have to get into this right now? It's a movie. And so you've got this demon pushing these Christian talking points the whole time. And I just found that odd that a demon would be pushing the Christian talking points while an atheist basically represents everybody outside of that Christian religion. Then we get to my final biggest issue with this movie. Toward the end of the movie, the demon goes to be executed. And after the execution, the demon basically jumps bodies, because he's a demon, and jumps into the doctor's body. The doctor then tries to take his own life with a gun that he pulls off a guard, and pulls the trigger several times, and it doesn't go off. And that then cuts, and the next scene is the Glenn Beck show. So they didn't hammer home enough that this movie is for a certain crowd. As soon as Glenn Beck showed up, I was like, oh, this movie's not for me. And so Glenn Beck shows up in this movie on the Glenn Beck show, and he's got the doctor on, and the doctor basically goes through this redemptive arc where he has now taken the demon's manifesto, but has skewed it in a way that proves that demons are evil and that people need to go away from that and they need to go toward God. So this doctor had a redemptive arc, which again is my biggest dislike of this movie, and my final dislike for this movie is that the doctor is given this redemptive arc that basically redeems him from the things he's done, and there's nothing, and I do mean nothing, that these people don't like more. These people love the redemptive story. So you've got this story of a demon telling basically the audience about all the evil things and how all the woke culture is bad, and then it ends with the atheist doctor basically having this redemption arc, because that is what happens in the Christian faith. And by the end of this movie, I was just like, I could have done so many more things with my time that would have been more useful, but instead I sat down and watched Nefarious for 2 hours. Ultimately, this is a movie that I just didn't get any enjoyment out of. didn't appreciate the message they threw. I didn't appreciate the message of being thrown back to this movie. I knew this movie was going to be extremely controversial online. You've got a very big group of people that are going to be like, no, everything in this movie is absolutely right. And then you got other people on the other side, everything in this movie is absolutely wrong. And I'm just kind of, like I said, in the middle reviewing a movie, like, I didn't really like it. Wasn't really my cup of tea. But that's my thoughts on Nefarious, guys, and I'm sure they're totally non-controversial and no one will be in the comment section getting very upset. And if you are, remember, this is YouTube. I don't really care. With all that said, guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button for me. It helps the channel. And if you want to hit that subscribe button to check out all the other reviews that I have done, I recommend it. And that's where I'm going to end this. Nefarious. It was a movie. Thanks for watching. Well, guys, we got through that very non-controversial movie review of Nefarious. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I've got all my 2022 reviews right there, or all my 2023 reviews right there.